All right, so we have Sarah Powell with us. She is our program director for the Hannah Grimes Center. And we have Marianne Christensen, who's our founder and executive director of the Hannah Grimes Center as well. And they're going to kick us off by talking about their experience with BusinessLab, the history and the impacts and so on and so forth. And then they will also give opportunity for everyone on the call to jump in and ask questions and give thoughts and ideas as well. So now I will pass it off to Marianne first. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Juliana. And a warm welcome to everybody. I look forward to spending a lot of time at the end in conversation. So we're just going to spend a few minutes here, but it really is a roundtable, even though it's on Zoom. And we look forward to having a great conversation. Before I get started, I'd just ask if you could put who you are, where you're from, and why you're here in the chat. And while that would be like pounding my head and chewing jumbo gum for me to look at, it'll give Sarah a chance to see who we're working with for when she starts presenting a little more detail about it. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the background and broad brushstrokes of what we found and what works. So we started this program in the fall of 2004. I had started a retail marketplace for locally made and grown products. Didn't have that much business experience myself, and it was really an attempt to provide a deeper level of business skills than we had been previously. So we got some USDA funding and dove in. So that we started with a 12-month program, and we were meeting once a month. It was a cohort of 5. And at the end of that period, on average, we had 1 new job per entrepreneur, and there was 30% year-over-year growth. So that was a really good result. Since then, we've had year-over-year growth of anywhere from 30 to 119%. So it really, depending on the cohorts that you have, it's a really effective growth program. And honestly, I mean, that was our first go round. So if you do it over time, you really can almost guarantee strong results with your businesses. So we went from that to doing it for once a month for 6 months. Then we moved to once a week for 6 weeks. And then we moved to once a week for 7 weeks once we added a pitch at as the final class. So it has definitely evolved. And as I say that, I then encourage you to take a look at the guide and please, do whatever you want with it. It's really a starting point. The reason we developed it, and trust me, through this evolution over the last almost 20 years, we've tried other things like Live Plan and the Canvas model and all of these things. And there was just always something that didn't work for our group of entrepreneurs. It wasn't right. It would seem to have a different intent. It was clunky. We completely missed some of the things we thought were important. So that is, we just, we'd go off and try these things, but we did come back to just building our own. And I suspect for any of you, you can find the same thing. Our communities are really unique. Our entrepreneur communities are really unique. So, use this as a starting point, throw it out if it doesn't work, revise it, look at some of the other ones, maybe they'd be a better fit for you, but that's how we've gotten here. Every time we run this class, we change it somewhat significantly afterwards. Whoever the instructor is, it's now Sarah and me, we'll sit down after every class and make notes, and then at the end really just kind of implement them, because we learn something every time. So you will be getting the benefit of all of that learning, but it may not be the perfect learning for you. So I think the most powerful thing that we found about this, no matter how you muck it up or not, is that having a cohort of people working on their businesses, you're already winning. They are so hungry for an opportunity to work on their business, meet other entrepreneurs, and understand that they're not alone in this. So I would encourage you, even if you're a little hesitant, you feel like you don't have the resources, you're not sure you know how to, just dive in and do it. And then take your learnings and do it again, because doing something, even if it's not even close to perfect, is so much better than doing nothing. And it's the only way you're going to learn what works for your community. Curating is another, we curate, and, I think that is something, if we haven't curated the right set of materials for you, like what is it that you need and how do you curate that? The cohort, like I said, is probably the most valuable piece, I think, for the businesses. They love the learning, their heads explode at something or another, and they get to, it really is a game changer. But really, that group of peers is the most powerful thing. And having a diverse set of peers is very powerful, because somebody in childcare might have an idea for a farmer, that's like, it's so out of the box that it's creative. It's what somebody else might not have thought of. So having that diverse cohort is really valuable. And then I think the last thing I would say is, really figure out what your goals are. Are you helping idea phase businesses? Do you have some startups? Do you have some longer term businesses that are maybe trying to make changes? But what is it in your community that you need right now, or that your entrepreneurs need right now? And just kind of know what your goal is, because that will help you decide who you're going to take in, and make sure it's a cohort that works well together. We have customized BusinessLab to do farm businesses, and another one to do food businesses. And we're thinking about doing one for childcare businesses. So, just choosing a cohort, creating some specialized content, getting most importantly, like a resource person who really knows that field, can be an opportunity too, to really, if there's something in your community that you really need to go after, that this, customizing it could be a way. So that's it for me for now. And, we'll have lots of time for questions afterwards, and I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. This is really exciting. Marianne and I love talking about BusinessLab because it's one of the most favorite things that we get to do in our work here at Hannah Grimes. And we're really pleased to be able to share our model with you and then learn from you with your questions. I thought I'd take a little bit of time just to talk about why we've picked the things we picked to cover in BusinessLab. There's any number of combinations of things that we could focus on in a business planning course for entrepreneurs, and through lots of trial and error, or not even trial and error, just like iterating, sort of like having a cohort and being like, oh, this really worked, and we might tweak this, over the years, as Marianne had mentioned, really allows us to get it really to a place where we're serving the folks in our community for the best outcomes. And so, one example I'll give is, we really start with that why, that personal why, as we all know, the mission, vision, values, but we spend a whole class really digging into that, because as we know, being a business owner is really challenging in so many ways, and really helping them get to that why and find a way to really talk about it is that golden nugget that they can carry with them throughout the whole class, but then beyond, when things get challenging or they're like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And, we always try to say, like, it's not a, how, can I, it's how can I, and that why really helps kind of bolster them in that. And then we talk about the why for your customer and your community, like why do people want to connect with you? What is it that you're solving, or what are you offering your community? That value proposition, as we like to say in business terminology. And then we do financials and marketing and project management. And I'll say that, when we think about how we approach each of those topics, for example, in our financials, we really focus on cash flow. For starting entrepreneurs, really understanding cash flow in their business is so fundamental, especially for the folks that are like, I don't have that much money right now, but like setting up good systems, basic systems, so that they can start understanding that concept, versus, really diving into things like, projections and how to get lines of credit and, things that will come and that they should do at some point. But really for the context of the class, kind of introducing, just talking about what are all the different kind of financial statements, what do they really mean, kind of unpacking some of the jargon so that folks can try to have finances seem a little fun and not so overwhelming. And with marketing, we really want to talk about, what not really like, how do we put together a really good Instagram post? We're thinking about what's the purpose of marketing for your business? Like, who is your customer? What kind of energy do you want to put into this? So I just wanted to spend a little time kind of thinking, kind of unpacking like the general content and kind of why we chose to put the things in. And then you'll see in the guide that we spend a whole class talking about project management. And we really found over the years that that was so important because BusinessLab is really this opportunity to work on your business, not just in your business. And as we all know from working with entrepreneurs, or if you're an entrepreneur yourself, there's a lot of hats to wear, for lack of a better metaphor. And it is, one thing to be the person, giving the massages and booking clients and doing all that, but it's another thing to be the visionary of your business. Do I grow? Is it time to take on employees? How do I do that? What does it look like? My financial system isn't really, my spreadsheet isn't really scaling with my business. I think I need QuickBooks, should I rent a bigger space? Like those higher level things that are the business owner pieces, not just the practitioner pieces. So we really try to help them, by class 5, they're like, we've learned a lot. There's a lot of things. And we can kind of sort of help them put those into buckets and really think about, okay, how do I think about project management in the context of running my business? The other thing I wanted to highlight as far as the content of class is the pitch. You'll notice that we spend basically right from day one, start talking to them about how to develop a 6-minute presentation. And we have a couple of opportunities throughout the class where they get to do, a 3-minute version and then a 6-minute version to their cohort. And then we culminate the class with an event where we invite our community, our people that support Hannah Grimes. We encourage all of the business owners to really think about who do they want in the room, their family, their friends, their existing customers, potential customers, their landlords, like whoever makes sense for them to come and really hear this beautiful, concise presentation about who they are, what their business is, what they're trying to do, and where it's headed in the future. It becomes this amazing tool, this powerful tool that they have to take with them after class. So it's not just, a Shark Tank pitch for investment. It's really a community pitch for people to understand what kind of entrepreneurial activity is happening in our community right now. It's really exciting. It's really fun. And we encourage anybody to really take advantage of that as an opportunity. If you're going to run BusinessLab wherever you are, it's a highlight of the program. And I think folks come in and they're like, I don't know, I don't really like presenting. And it takes a lot of coaching. I spend a lot of time one-on-one and in the group outside of class really working on their pitches. And it becomes like a really sweet bonding experience for everybody. But also like, Marianne and I are always just like goosebumps. It's so cool to see they come in without a pitch or without a presentation. And that last pitch they give is always just so amazing. They're so proud. And one thing I mentioned in the pitchfork session last week. So for Chris, you already heard this, is that one really cool thing that can happen is folks that have an idea or they're just in the beginning stages of their business, their family's like, oh, you're just doing this like wacky thing. And they come and they give their presentation and their spouses and moms and dads and kids are in the room, and it crystallizes not only for the entrepreneur, but for their people that are in their life. They're like, well, this is a thing. This is a real thing. Like this, you can talk about it and it makes sense. And so that can be a really impactful moment, crystallizing moment for the entrepreneur in their sort of this part of their journey. So it's really fun, really special. And I would say that another thing that we encourage is, stay close to these entrepreneurs, keep checking in on them. And, as their businesses grow and scale, invite them back to talk to the class that's happening at that time. It's always really exciting for the existing class to meet someone that was in BusinessLab a few years before and to hear their journey. And it's just another way to help them build their network within the context of, this development of their business. And, we like to say that the network is vital oxygen for entrepreneurs, and it can mean a lot of things, but definitely connecting with other entrepreneurs in the community is a part of that. So I think I'll stop there because I can definitely keep being excited and telling you more things about BusinessLab, but I would really just love to hear what you're all thinking, kind of what kind of challenges or opportunities are you seeing in your community to kind of offer something like BusinessLab? Like, I'm just really curious to know like where you're all coming from and what you're working on. And Marianne and I can certainly answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I'll let you feel free to drop in the chat, but I'd love to hear your voice and get to know you. So you'd unmute and just fire away. We'll answer as we can. Anybody?
I would just jump in and say that I actually went through the BusinessLab program when I first started working here. Marianne thought that it would, and rightly so, be a great exercise so that I could understand the program. And so I actually took Radically Rural through the 7-week BusinessLab program. And while it wasn't an exact fit as far as it being, a business in the way we traditionally think of it, it was really impactful in really having to hone our mission, vision, values, what we're trying to accomplish, our model for financial sustainability, and as they mentioned, the cohort itself. So there are, a couple of small business owners in the area that I'm still connected with. One of them was a small outdoor program for kids. And, I've sent for 2 summers my kids to her summer camp. And anytime people are asking about ideas for summer camps, I'm like, oh, send them to Wild Hearts. And it's just, I think a big part of it is just really understanding what's going on with your in your community and getting connected with it. And then really having to distill the work you're doing into something that is easily understandable and digestible by others. Because for those of us who are ideas people, oftentimes our heads are just constantly swimming with ideas and we have all these kind of rabbit trails of things. And then when you're having to distill it into a 6-minute pitch with a corresponding business case, it really forces you to say like, okay, all of these things are great, but what is this and how can I communicate it to other people? So I found it really valuable, even taking a nonprofit program through that program. I was also curious, Sarah, if you wanted
for a minute, Eric, did you have a comment or a question? I can see your mic going off.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question. So is this a program that we take, or is it a program that we teach in our community?
It's a program that you can offer in your community.
Okay.
So you could take it if you, so are you an entrepreneur looking for a program like this?
So my backstory real quick is I left my small town 45 years ago, and I was in the apartment development business, and I recently retired a year ago in July, and both of my daughters have businesses in our small town, but it looks like many other small towns in rural America where 2/3 of the storefronts are vacant or boarded up. And I want to try to apply. I've built and developed about 14,000 market rate apartments over my career. And I want to do what I can to help. And there's a fair amount of young couples that have started to buy buildings around the square. So there's a lot of good signs. And at the same time, it's like, well, where do you start?
Yeah, so this could be, I don't know if there's any organizations in your town, like a chamber or a small business development center or an economic development group, and they're also variable. So, whether this would be a good fit or not, but, if you could find a partner to work with to offer this, that's great. If you could also try to find somebody to just run it. Again, the guide really takes you through detail, step by step, blow by blow what to do. So I think worst case scenario, you try it on your own. But if you do that, I would try it with try to get a seasoned entrepreneur or two along for the ride to make sure that there's good guidance and good leadership and coaching for the group. But I think the most important thing to do in a small town, if you don't have resources, is just to get people together around a table. And if this gives you a little more guidance on specifically how to do it, then that's good. But I think mostly gathering and sitting down. So it sounds like a housing focus is what you're doing.
Not
interested in?
Not necessarily. That's just my background, what I did. But most of the last 40 years, I was in Detroit. So I watched Detroit go to the low, and then I watched Dan Gilbert single-handedly kind of bring the city back. And he did that by seeding and bringing young entrepreneurs into the city that were willing to live through the grit. And so I'm thinking to do that in a much smaller way in the small town that we live in. And to, because the startup cost there is obviously significantly lower than if they were in other places. But what we struggle with there is there are just literally no people on the streets after 5 o'clock. And, in any place I've ever done any development work, it is what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do we have residential units downtown? Because all of these buildings around the square and in this particular town, the courthouse is magnificent. It's just a beautiful building. And they all had residential units above. And there's at least 6 young couples that have purchased buildings. They have their business in the lower section. And yet it's taken all their capital to do that. So it's like, if we could start to figure out how to help them in their business in general, because they come and go, right? Business in general is tough, as we've all said, let alone in a small town. So, yeah.
I would say get together with some people you think might be interested and have an open-ended conversation about, like, what does this town need next to grow? So it sounds like you've gotten some things. You've gotten some younger people to move in, buy buildings, renovate them, and start businesses. What's the next step? Like, what's one thing? It sounds like maybe a food venue at night might be the one thing. And, could you as a community come around supporting that by asking, is somebody interested in doing this? And, maybe you could have, we had for our farm biz, we customized this for farm businesses in the spring. We had a $5,000 cash prize actually for that pitch. They're usually not that, but, maybe you do a business plan. Maybe you offer this thing, you have the pitch at the end, and maybe there is some money. And that's a way for the community to start getting excited about, like, ideas that would wake you up, that give people hope and get them inspired. But if you could find, I got 3 people to give enough money that we had $5,000, and so it's not that hard to get some money together. And that, we had local food and local drink always at our events, and just create the scene that you think people are wanting at your events as well. And then just take it from there. Once you start getting a little energy with a group of people and start showing what's possible, people will get jazzed and move forward. It's just often finding the way, it's so overwhelming. What's the next step?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll also just toss in this morning. So I think many of you are familiar with Radically Rural and how we operate, but we have 7 different tracks that we focus on, though it's any part of rural life that we're interested in, but specifically clean energy, local journalism, entrepreneurship, Main Street, so on and so forth. And our Main Street track leader, we had our track leader monthly meeting this morning, and we were kind of brainstorming about themes for the summit next year. And our Main Street track leader dropped a link for a book that he was really inspired by in the chat called Dream, Play, Build. And we're kind of toying around with the idea of pulling some of the concepts out of there for a theme for next year's summit. But it sounds like it might be a good book to read for the stage that you're in. And so I'll drop that link in the chat. And I would definitely highly recommend staying engaged with our network too, because we have so many small towns around the country that are dealing with similar things than you are, and there's folks who have tried different things, and thanks, Sarah, and who have kind of, none of us have to reinvent the wheel. We can help each other and support each other. And so definitely stay engaged with our network. And if you find those couple people that you're interested in sitting down with, like Marianne mentioned, then get them together and come to Radically Rural in September, and you'll be really inspired by the people you meet and kind of the diversity of representation, both in industry and experience. So thanks for dropping that in the chat, Sarah.
Two resources, Eric, if you're not aware of them already, are you aware of the Daily Yonder? Do you know that? So it's an e-newsletter.
No.
It's free. Oh my gosh. Subscribe to the Daily Yonder. You can easily find it. You're going to get ideas every day. They're an amazing organization. And the other one is a little more ad lib, but it's two women from the Midwest who started an organization called Save Your Town. So I think it's saveyourtown.org or something like that.
I actually know Deb and Becky really, really well.
Okay. Yep. So they're full of all sorts of little tidbits and ideas of how to just get started. Just do it.
Yes. Yeah, I knew them from our apartment marketing business, but I have been friends with them for probably 8 or 10 years. So
yeah,
that's amazing. I'm sure they have lots of ideas.
Yeah, they do, for sure.
It's awesome.
That's
any
great.
other I'd love to hear why you're here, what you're struggling with.
I can jump in with a couple more things that I thought of that I wanted to highlight. So you'll notice in the guide, we give a draft of the application that we use to onboard entrepreneurs. And I will say that it takes work to convince people sometimes. Sometimes people self-identify and they're like, yeah, this is totally the next step for me in my idea or my business. That becomes, obvious. And then other people are people that I meet with one-on-one, and I'm sort of talking to them about, where they're at and what they're working on. And it takes a little nudging sometimes, to get them to sign up. So I think, over, years and years and years of being in our community, providing entrepreneurial resources and building relationships, we've seen that get a little bit easier, but I'm not going to say that it's, the most easy thing. But once you get them, sort of engaged and going through that application process, which is really that first step of class, like we really get them thinking deeply about, most of the things that we're going to cover in class, kind of pre-familiarizing them with like where they're at right now and really thinking about how, what they're trying to do. And so they come into class like really ready to kind of dive in. And that's by design. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. And yes, I can share the guide. Have it open.
And I would say too, if some of you have signed up to get the guide already, like we're planning a big renovation again this year of that guide. So if you've gone through our portal and gotten it, you will get updates as they come out. And what we're hoping is that if you make some changes and updates, you'll share those and we can share those.
Yeah, that's great.
What is the cost of this?
It's free. What do we charge? We charge $600 for our entrepreneurs, but the guide is free. for you today, it is free.
Gotcha.
But yeah, we had a donor who helped us write up the protocols of running it, which was helpful to us so that we can, if we get a new program director or we're onboarding somebody else to help run it, it made it much smoother for us to do that. But it also just meant that we could share it. So is, and we do charge $600 for it. Anybody, we have scholarships, so we will scholarship up to $500. We have found that, like, if they're in it for free, they're not always as motivated to finish it. So,
Chris, I see you have a question. Your hand's up.
Yeah. Hello again. Nice to see Sarah.
nice to see you too.
Marianne. Yep. You did a good job selling me on coming to this session after our discussion last week. Very sort of, I guess, general question. Have you found, or do you have a sense of, does the geography of the group matter? Does this work at a broader regional scale if you brought people together from more than one community, or does it really need to be truly effective from your perspective, a single place, a single community?
I mean, we
I would say that it is.
Oh, God, you're gonna say it.
Go ahead.
Say.
It's completely flexible and adaptable. It is so, it works for different stages and it works for different sectors. And the people who are coming together in our room, I don't know that any of them know each other in advance. So it's not like it's a community of people who already know each other. And they're also from different communities around the region. So is my internet falling off?
A little bit. You're a little bit spotty. It's okay though.
Is my internet falling off? Yep. So I think geography wouldn't matter, Chris. I think if you're pulling from a bigger range, that it will not impact the experience at all. Might make it stronger.
Yeah, and
I think the more diversity in the room, the better.
Definitely, and I'll just piggyback on that. We service like sort of a region in our part of New Hampshire. So how in New Hampshire we have the different counties and then all the towns within those. So we definitely have a reach within our area so that it works not just people that live in Keene. And with the Food Business Lab, while we prefer the in-person cohort, we just think it's a really rich experience. We did run the first iteration of the Food Biz Lab virtually, and we were able to kind of expand our reach into Vermont and Massachusetts, which are bordering sort of this part of our state. And that it was another valuable experience and just slightly different. So it really, you just want to have a strong facilitator that can kind of take the group through the process and set the expectations and really set the culture of the group. And I think that you can really make this what it needs to be in wherever your place is.
Yeah, you anticipated my follow-up question, which is, have you experimented with sort of the virtual side of this? And some of the work that we do here, pre-COVID, we would do everything in person. And then during COVID, we did as much as we could kind of with Zoom and other. And now that we're going back to more in person, it's interesting. We have a lot of the folks we can work with who are more resistant, and not because they don't like getting in the room together, but it's just like, well, couldn't we have that conversation on Zoom instead? So we're playing with, how do you hybridize some of these? So I was just kind of wondering if you've started to play with that a bit at all. And are there like certain, I was just kind of going through the 7 sessions, seven or six, whatever.
7, it's 7. Yeah.
And, would some of them lend themselves more to an online discussion versus others? And sort of, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I would say that if you want to try it with a geographic spread where people really can't travel, with the Food Biz Lab, we started with kind of a boot camp weekend. So we did dinner together Friday night, did Saturday, and did part of Sunday. And I think that's really critical. And I would say if any of it needs to be in person, that first session of the mission, vision, values, that is set up in a way that people really get to know each other. So if you're talking about mission, you get to know what everybody in your group wants to do. If you're talking about vision, you really start to get deeper into getting to know each other and almost your dreams, right? And here's what I see. And values, when you're talking about your values, the room really does get to know what matters to you and who you are. And those bring up those conversations. So that first session is really intended to not only get that work done in the business plan, but that's a really good way to introduce each other. So if you could start with something like that in person, and then, you know, do the others more remotely. In person, it's definitely the best way to do it, but sometimes doing it is better than not doing it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, Chris, too, is like, you know, if it's between doing it and not doing it, like, do it online, it's fine, you'll figure it out. And the first class, yes, in person would be great. And then I would say the pitch event as well. It's just, if you can organize and get some sponsors, like really make it a thing, you know, like it's a celebration of new ideas and opportunity in our communities. So I think it's really important to really highlight that and make sure you get a robust mix of folks in the room, the stakeholders in the room. And what was it? I had another train of thought. Oh, the other thing I wanted to share was, you know, our sort of facilitation model is to have like a lead instructor and then what do we say, Marianne? A lead instructor and a co-instructor. And then we bring in guest instructors. So, you know, whereas, you know, Marianne and I could, you know, take them through probably most everything at this point. It is really nice to have a fresh perspective. So we bring in we run the first 2 classes ourselves, kind of putting our arms around setting the culture of the group, kind of really establishing that rapport, really getting them to do that deep thinking. And then for class 3, we bring in a guest instructor for the financials. And then we bring in somebody for marketing. I think, you know, I alluded to this before, you know, just kind of diversifying who's coming in to work with the entrepreneurs, especially if they're local folks or regional folks. It kind of helps them. It's another way to build that network for them. And for us, we also have a coaching roster, which I know, Chris, we talked a little bit about last week. And that's, you know, we try to tap people that are on that roster to come in, because then it's a really nice follow on. They can make appointments and have more in-depth conversation with those folks afterwards as sort of a wraparound service. But, you know, just really kind of helping folks see the value in getting together, whether it's a Zoom room or in an in-person space, but really engaging stakeholders in your community to have buy-in is important. Yeah. Other questions? I see Janet from Network Kansas. We have some friends over there that have been really connected to us here at Radically Rural. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we had a session with Network Kansas at Radically Rural, not this past September, but the September before, which was really fun.
Totally fun.
So one question that I have is, like, let's say, you know, Eric or someone else on this call who hasn't necessarily had time to look at the guide yet. You did briefly screen share it, but I'm wondering, you know, if you could pick the first 3 steps, like for someone who wanted to do that, like probably number 1, right, would be to at least skim the guide, read the guide. Number 2, maybe find someone to lead it with, or like, what would you say, like the first 3 steps would be if someone wanted to do this?
I think reading it all the way through, so you really get a sense, and I wouldn't skim it. I would read it. Just, you're going to have questions and then you'll realize they're answered later, but really kind of close your eyes and read it. Okay, you can't do that, but, you know, really sit back and read it and think, you know, what is this like? Try to envision how it is. And that could even be your first step of like, I might do this way instead, you know, or this, you know, this person could help me do this. And then we do, I think, getting the people in place that might run this with you too. So Sarah, as program director, is really kind of the lead instructor, and she'll do the emailing. So make sure you have clear roles. Who's going to email the content to people in advance, reminders, get things set up, and then having a co-instructor. So you might have somebody from an organization who's, core and does all that stuff. And then your co-instructor could be a dedicated entrepreneur in the community that, is willing to give back, and who might have a plethora of stories in their back pocket of, that really, could, group by group, different things might be needed, but somebody with some deep entrepreneurial experience, I think, is really helpful. And then those guest instructors, I think, who in your community is doing it, with marketing and financials and the project management, those are real fields, finding your mission, vision, values. Those are kind of business things of business, and so pretty well suited to us doing that. And it does, it's intentionally done that the first 2 classes are just us. We really get that group going. And then after that, it just becomes mostly the guest speakers, and little bits here and there. The first couple of weeks, we're sort of like, oh my gosh, it's business lab time again. And, we're preparing for class, we're teaching class. And then, the progressive weeks get to be like, okay, we're showing up, we get to listen to them too. And, for those of you who are in the business and doing the business, I have to say, I never get tired of hearing from our guest instructors. No matter how many things you've heard about marketing, either there's one more thing you need to learn, or you always need to be reminded, right? You learn things, you read things, you take workshops about all of this stuff, and you can only take in so much at a time, and you may only need certain things at a certain time, and you need something more the next time. So it's also just really amazing experience to be able to go through that class over and over. I think it makes us better at running our organization and doing our thing. It's a real pleasure to do that. And it is really, you feel like a proud mother hen when they are doing their pitches. I can't tell you what an expansion of your heart it is to just see them up there giving their all, and knowing where they came from and the struggles they, people not in our class, but people who die. We had somebody who had a wedding in the middle of it once and just kept coming, and people's lives go on, and so the group really builds too. So I think you really get to know these people, and you get to know their passion for what they're doing, and you just are so proud when they do it. It really builds beautiful community. And then I think too, just like in your community, if you keep doing this, you do raise the level of business startups in your region, and the talk of like, oh, have you heard of this new business, and people love being in the know. So inviting people to the pitch, it's like, oh, we all have those people who are the first one to go to the new restaurant in town, and they're talking about it, and I think giving a group of people who care about your community and care about businesses an opportunity at their next dinner or cocktail hour to talk about new businesses that are exciting to them just does something to your community over time. It gives more visibility to this process of starting, which, unless you've done it, is completely not understood or valued to the level that it should be, of how hard it is.
Yeah. One other thing I'll mention, we would have come up anyway, but prompted me with Juliana's question is, we are available to have, a time to meet one-on-one for some follow-up conversation. And then we do offer additional time for a consulting fee. So if this is something you're really looking to launch in your community, we'd love to find a way to just, have a follow-up conversation. And if you want to ask more specific questions, we're happy to do that, no charge. And then if you really want some more added support, we're available to do that as well. And, we want to make sure that, folks are getting the support they need to really launch these opportunities. And Juliana had alluded to somebody that is using the guide. They just completed a class, and it was kind of an awesome thing of somebody who came in through the Radically Rural Network, like you all, and was really interested in the Pitchfork guide, which is another guide that we have for a core program at Hannah Grimes, which is to take people through a process of developing a pitch and presenting for either a prize or funding. And, you know, I had that consulting conversation with him and really had this opportunity to kind of just understand like his why, you know, like what is it, what's driving you in your role in your community. And he had an economic development kind of job for his town, and you know why he was excited to have Pitchfork and what he was really trying to offer the community. And through that conversation we kind of came out, well, there used to be Pitchfork or pitch opportunities and people, it was really hard to like get people on board, and he was trying to really, what we got to was he was really trying to reinvigorate this sort of entrepreneurial ecosystem, this sense that like entrepreneurship is happening, not only just already happening, but is possible in his community, and wanted to find ways to support entrepreneurs, but also kind of get that community buy-in. And so we kind of ended in a place where he decided to start with BusinessLab, you know, run a cohort of entrepreneurs through BusinessLab to really establish relationships with a set of people that then could be some pipeline to turn into a Pitchfork opportunity. But he was able to kind of engage, he was a one man show, like he was the only person, so he was able to kind of like through the process of organizing BusinessLab find people in his immediate community that could come in and support him with BusinessLab and co-teach different classes. So, you know, I just give that as an example of, you know, different ways that, you know, this can support whatever it is that you're trying to do in your community. So I'm thinking of you, Eric, you know, in your kind of questions, it's like, who are those folks in your community doing like economic development, and what's sort of their approach to that? And is there a gap, right? Who's falling through those cracks? Because I think we're all well-intentioned. We want things to be happening in our communities, but you know, some of the funding streams and different sort of approaches of economic development might leave out some certain levels of entrepreneurship or not. And it's just like, so what's the lay of the land? Like who's doing it? And how can you kind of get them on board and maybe supporting like this as an opportunity to kind of funnel some new folks, reinvigorate some new opportunities in the community.
That's a great suggestion. You know, what I see is we don't have a DDA, which I think is what we desperately need, but that's a different topic. And we have a countywide chamber, and there are these meetings with the downtown businesses, but it's very awkward. And I'm not slamming the chamber or anything like that, but it's basically dysfunctional. And so, you know, part of it is how do you get the leaders on board to begin with, and then, you know, bring because we just have so many vacancies. And it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for, it doesn't have to be young entrepreneurs, but new entrepreneurs to come in and start, but they need help with things. There was one gal talking at the meeting and she's in a particular business. And I said, well, how long is your runway? And she said, what do you mean runway? I said, how much capital do you have? Do you have 90 days, 6 months, a year? And like, I could tell that she hadn't even really thought about that, right? But somehow they remodeled their business and they're in business now. And just to your point, folks who have not gone through that whole piece of actually running a business for a sustained period of time, they only know what they know. And you know, in business, if you run out of capital, it's game over.
You know, you bring up 3 things for me, Eric. We'll see if I remember all 3 by the time I start talking about the first one. But one is that when I started Hannah Grimes Marketplace 25 years ago, I did not know what I didn't know. I was just passionate about this idea that local people should be buying from other local people. It was before the buy local movement. I had no clue. So we started in November. Like, I remember the next January sitting down and with somebody who did have some retail experience. We lived through the holidays somehow. And then, sitting down to do a budget, and I didn't know how to do a budget. It's like, well, what are your expenses going to be for a year? Start from there. And then what do you need to earn to do that? And I looked at that and, kind of thought based on what we did in the fourth quarter, what we could do. And I said, oh, it looks like we could make a $5,000 profit by the end of the year. And he says very kindly, yes, you could, Marianne, if you weren't out of business. The whole cash flow idea, he showed me in April, you've run out of money because your money is made in the fourth quarter. How simple. Like, I didn't know that. To your point, I didn't know that. I knew that I wanted to do this thing. So I think that is one thing. Another thing is, if you do have organizations in your town that are not effective, it is very awkward to start something else. Especially if you don't feel you can go through them. So I think, trying to think of a way to do something that feels different enough from what they're already doing, so that it doesn't feel like, oh, that's not working, we're going to do something else over here. And then the third thought, look at that, everybody, I've remembered all three. The third thought is, there is an easier way to start than BusinessLab. I hadn't thought of this, but I've often advised communities that are just getting started to just get started. And Eric, we have an update drill format that if you wanted to get maybe just 2 or 3 other businesses together once a week, once a month, I could give you a format. It came from the Edward Lowe Foundation. I don't know if anybody is familiar with them, years ago, so I don't even know if they're still using it, and I've revised it a little, but it was an amazing format where you just start giving updates, timed updates, and then somebody's taking notes. You find out what the pressing issues are along the way, and then you as a group decide what pressing issues, but that just human beings can sit down and do. And I'd be happy to share that with anybody who's interested in having it.
That'd be great. Because part of it too is there's nothing that prevents me as an example for getting up in these meetings and sort of taking the lead, right? But this is, I'm just getting started with it. And, the last thing I want to do is create any division between something that's already existing, but it doesn't, in short order, you can tell whether something seems to be effective or not.
Yeah. Sounds like you've talked to somebody who didn't know what her runway was. Ask her if she would want to sit down once a month. See if there's somebody else. And really, if you had 3 to 5 people, you could just start there. And then if they want to learn more, then maybe you could take the BusinessLab curriculum and kind of go through it together. And then if it seems like it's got some legs, maybe it grows and it becomes something you offer in the community.
Yeah, I do think it's twofold. One is we want to keep the existing businesses in business. In my own experience, it's a lot easier to get into business than it is to get out. And then the second is to bring new businesses into town. So it's sort of a two-pronged approach.
Can I ask you a follow-up question, Eric? And if anyone else wants to jump in, please feel free. But hopefully this is still a valuable conversation for everyone. But Eric, I was thinking, do you guys have an economic development strategy, comprehensive strategy that's okay? So that's sort of even back a couple more steps is going to one of those meetings and seeing if that's something that people will be excited to work on together. There's, you have eyeballs, you're noticing that there's vacancies on the main street. So it's okay, what's our plan for this? And how does that fit into, all the rest of the sort of economic strategies or not, that are not having a strategy is also by default a strategy, right? So if you want to have some agency and what happens and how you build up and get people involved, that seems like a kind of an interesting place to start too. And that's something you can maybe go to a meeting like that and say, hey, what do we need to do to do something like this? And we have some great examples here in the region where we live. We call it the community economic development strategy, or their CEDS process, but really just an opportunity to think through what do we want to see in the next 5-10 years, and make it a place that people want to move back to or stay in or move,
Sure.
move to. So
Looks like Taryn and Chris both have their mics off. One last word to you, Eric, is I would just get started with the businesses you have. If then new businesses would have something to go to.
And just a time check, we have just 2 minutes left. So Taryn and anyone else, if you have something quick you want to add, then please do.
I just put a quick note in the the chat box there. So Sarah and or Marianne, whatever makes sense. I think I would like to take you up on that offer for a quick chat, because I got like 7 different questions about very practical things about how this might be adapted to our context here, but it's probably better just to have a specific conversation around that.
And Chris, it's been fun watching it get dark behind you. Is it like 4:30 there or something?
It is, yeah, 4:30, and we're just the end of our sunset here.
And good noticing, Jillian. I was noticing Chris when we started, like, wow, what a view you have.
Beautiful. Yeah.
We're in a nice spot here. Yep.
Well, if you ever like need a visit for some reason related to the work we do, I'm sure we could think of a reason to get up there.
But as we were talking about your consulting fees, I said, well, would you accept? We can maybe pay for travel if but
That's a nice place.
Yeah, I mean that sounds like
I feel like we should go.
cool.
Let's talk, Chris.
Well, it's been wonderful having everyone here, and I'm just going to drop the link to the Radically Rural newsletter in the chat. That's the best way to keep in touch with the upcoming roundtables we have, the summit, and then also key programs from the Hannah Grimes Center that might be relevant to other small communities and municipalities. So this has been great. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Marianne. And I hope that we will see you all again in the future at some point.
I'll just add one more thing, Eric, and if anybody else, if you want that update drill, it's MAK, Marianne Christensen, MAK@hannahgrimes.com. Just email me and I'll email you back.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.